All right, now that we've discussed kind of like the backstory of these two students, these two modes of thought, again, the brain, these hemispheres work together for most tasks. It's not just one side that is active. This is oversimplification, but two modes of thought. Talk about the right hemisphere mostly being in charge of like the left side of the body, and nonverbal thought, left hemisphere mostly in charge of like language, speech, like verbal thought. Again, an oversimplification, but I think useful for our purposes. Now let's talk about image streaming and how to do it when you cannot visualize, meaning you are not seeing any visuals. So the first step in this whole thing is, if you haven't already, I would suggest learning what is sensory thought or what is nonverbal thought. There's some really good posts by a user named Apps for Life, who's headed up and moderator on the Cure Aphantasia Reddit. That's where I learned a lot, and that's where I learned about sensory thought. Again, that's that the concept is presented there on that, in that community of like, how do you start visualization? Well, you got to do sensory thought. How do you do that? Well, you ask yourself questions, which I talked about in the previous video. You present the left mode, the left brain, or you present your mind, if you want to think about it as a whole, which we should, with a question that cannot be answered in words. Like, what is the specific shade of red in a Coca-Cola can, on a Coca-Cola can, versus the red on that balloon that I see? Like, I don't care if you have the best vocabulary in the world, there's degrees of hue that you cannot use words to describe. So the idea is to force your mind to respond in a way that is a recollection or recalling without words. Or how does sugar taste versus salt? And by asking questions like these, and there's probably like 100 other questions, you try to learn how to talk or think in senses and not in words, because you don't have the words to answer the question. I think this is a powerful concept when we talk about how to visualize and mental imagery. Is you need to, in order to activate and listen to nonverbal thought, you need to be able to present yourself with tasks that can only be handled by right mode thinking. So I got like a notebook of, and I'm going to refer to it here, some of the notes I took while I was listening to the Einstein factor. One of the things that was surprising about, like, one of the quotes about Einstein, he was reported to have said, "I rarely think in words at all." And that his special theory on relativity was basically birthed by nonverbal thought, like him imagining himself like traveling on a train or something like that, on a beam of light, and like looking at a mirror and wondering, like, does he see himself in the mirror as he's going at the speed of light on this train or riding on this beam of light? He's thinking about this not in words. He's imagining seeing himself and looking at a mirror, and can he see himself in that mirror? But the point is, I rarely think in words at all. That is the goal of like meditation of various forms. That was like my goal, and like trying to shut up the verbal thought patterns and like think the artist's way. And like, that's one of the key things, these themes that are repeating over and over. Now, I would say that overall, like what Dr. Wenger is saying is that's not what we're trying to do. And that's not the point of image streaming. But it can be an effective practice and shows us the importance of learning how to think non-verbally. Another concept I have a quote of is you get more of what you reinforce. So not only do you reinforce it, but you get more of it. So that's something that's also important when it comes to like practice of image streaming. The more you reinforce listening to your mental images and nonverbal thought, you will get more of it, and it will increase. It will increase in vividness and frequency, and that's what we want. Another thought was that most of our brain actually works in sensory images. Very little parts of our brain works in words. And like that's huge, because imagine like you're only using a small part of your mind, or only listening to a small part of your mind for your whole life. Like what opens up and what abilities open up when you actually listen to more parts of your mind. As I'm talking, I'm having very few instances, like the cadence of mental imagery is like so low. And again, they're not visuals, first of all, or the visual images are so weak that they're not discernible. But I know what, and I'm going to discuss what that means. But it's when I do, if I could like talk all the time with mental imagery, like it would make speaking so much more rich and easier for me to talk about the topics that I want to discuss. I already have a sense of that as I'm speaking, and like experiencing, like practicing a little bit right now. So those are some initial thoughts. Now I want to talk about language for a moment and descriptive vocabulary. I came up with this idea. I don't think there's something like formal, at least that I'm aware of, and I Googled for it, but something called descriptive vocabulary rating. Imagine a test where you have to describe a scene and rate like how descriptive it is. Like someone may say, well, oh, a cup, that's a cup. Someone could say, oh, that's a mug. Oh, that's a white mug. Oh, that's a white porcelain mug with a cool temperature or something like that. If you're interested in storytelling, such as in Dungeons and Dragons, and I have 2 young children, and there's a game called Scales and Tales. It's for like young kids to basically be introduced to like tabletop role playing. I've been interested in role playing games, video games, since I was a kid. Then as an adult discovered, tabletop role playing type games like Dungeons and Dragons. Wasn't allowed to, really be into that, and wasn't aware of it as a kid. But as an adult, I tried to like run a little campaign using this book called Scales and Tales for my kids. And as I'm trying to like describe the scenes, like for someone who can't visualize and no mental imagery, incredibly difficult. But it is more difficult when the language that you have, the language that I have, is not sufficient to present a scene in a way that evokes emotion and that evokes a sense of being there. Like, why is it that my sensory descriptive language is so poor, even though I'm able to talk, and really, like, I would think the left brain, the left mode of thinking is going all the time. Why can't I use descriptive words? And so, like, as I'm trying to play this game with my kids, like my partner at the time, I don't recall if the exact instance, that's the episodic memory problems there. But I remember saying, yeah, I'm not really that good at this. And then my partner's like, yeah, you're not good at this. Kind of downer, discouraging. But the point is not that. The point is that it stood out to me. I have very poor descriptive vocabulary. That came up months later when I work in web development, and we we had like 2,000 images, let's say, and we needed to make them accessible, and we had used an AI tool that I'm not really fully aware of, because I didn't take part in that process, to generate alternative text. So just for those without web development experience, and I feel like most people, if you're looking at this video, you know how to use the web, but you actually don't know much about what's happening. Some people don't actually know the difference between like a browser and a search engine, because now they're so closely intertwined. It's like, anyways, for people who can't see images clearly or at all, the code that represents the image or refers to the image, there's like a property that's invisible to you, looking at it with your eyes, but the browsers can access the code, and screen readers, these assistive devices, can read it and give you a text description of the image. So there's a picture of a dog. It's a golden Cocker Spaniel, and you're looking at it. There's a grassy background, and it's a sunny day. All that now I just did was like actually mental imagery. I'm not seeing it clearly, but it's there. I'm not seeing an image, but it's there. So there's an image in a web browser. The browser and the screen reader can read, for those who can't see it, read the text and give a text readout of that. Now it's very helpful, because now people who can't see can understand the content of what's on the page and understand the images. And so with computers, instead of having a human go and have to hand type all those, let's get AI, which can interpret images and understand them and create a text description. That's called alternative text or alt text in web development, and just populate that so we don't have to like manually do it. But computers and AI make mistakes, and we humans need to go in and review and check those was the task. So 2,000 images is a lot, and so it was just like, okay, you take 50, I'll take 50, you take 50, we'll do this week, and then next week we'll do it, and again until we get these all done. As I'm doing this process, I'm like, oh wow, this is ridiculous, like look at all these mistakes, and I've got a ton to do, until I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to copy this image, put it into an AI language model, ChatGPT, and have it generate the correct text, instead of me having to like think about it. And because some of the things were just way off, and there's a reason for that, but it was like, oh yeah, perfect, this is like a great description. Yeah, copy paste, replace the junk that was in there before. But as I'm thinking about I'm trying to manually correct some of these myself, and I'm looking at the descriptions that the ChatGPT is putting in there, and I'm like, this is freaking incredible. I couldn't write that well if I tried, and computers can do a lot of things better than anything that we can do, whether it's calculating numbers. So it's not like too incredibly like profound, but I'm thinking about like, okay, so if I had to write a description, it would be like building, blue sky with some people. I could do better, but that's like the level. And ChatGPT is coming up with like this like perfect description of using vocabulary that I don't even have. And so the point is, I'm noticing the gap between myself and like this ultra professional like writer. And I'm guessing that, my ability to describe things in my descriptive language is pretty poor. And like, oh, this is something I want to improve on. But I'm noticing, and I'm thinking, I think this is probably also tied to like this whole mind brain thing that's going on, and like just patterns that I've had in life. And the pattern, in summary, is this: I don't remember a lot of things and words because they haven't been anchored to like sensory thought. And I don't tend to pay attention to descriptive words because they're not tied to sensory thought experiences. And I don't use them very much because I don't speak in that language. And, also, I probably read and have read that, like the same amount as an average person. I wasn't like a huge bookworm like my daughter is, but I don't shy away from reading. But the things that I was reading was not like descriptive prose, wasn't poetry. I have like been reading more fiction lately, but when you don't have a mental image of what you're reading, it's not the same. So why am I talking about this? Well, it occurred to me, and I shared this with a new friend of mine, that I need to build like a library of word and sensory associations. I can't pronounce that word today for some reason. Like when someone says the word banana or I say the word banana, I want it to immediately evoke the image of a banana. Whether that's just like without a visual of it, but like a sense of the shape of the banana, whether it's the taste of the banana, whether it's the idea of someone using the banana as a phone, like I want it to be more than just the concept of the fruit with this very, very weak like conceptual understanding of what a banana is and that it's a fruit and like just details about it. I want it to be like a whole experience and multiple layers of that, so that when it's invoked, someone says a banana, and I'm thinking of Mario Kart now, and I'm thinking of the banana peels like splayed open and like something, somebody slipping on it and like the cartoon noise of them slipping on it. Like that's what I want to build, like an association. So I have descriptions and descriptive words, and I have mental imagery all woven together. And the reason why that was incredible to me is because as I'm listening to the Einstein factor, like the first step that he talks about is like learning how to, like the very first exercise is like choose two corners in a room and describe one like sterile, in a sterile manner, just like without any sensory words, without any descriptive like sensory words, and then describe the other like with full, like try to use sensory descriptive terms and like compare the two. And I was like, that was like my plan was like, I need to improve my descriptive vocabulary, not for imagine things like in my mental imagery bank, if you will, not while image streaming, but just in like look at something and describe it. See how well you can describe it. Like an author, like describe the rock face of this mantle that I'm looking at and see how good you can do at it. Like, can the person listening like really get a sense for what you're describing, or is it very vague and very limited and very like paltry, the description? So that was huge. I'm like, oh, I'm on the right track, because I was like going down this path, and look, it's the first thing that is talked about in how to like practice this image streaming. So to give you an example, last night I was like, okay, let me just try to like write out a bunch of words that are descriptive, and I have them like written down right here. And as I was doing it more and more, then it was like easier and easier, and I'm just trying to get them out. I'm not trying to like tie them to sensory thought at this point, but there's colors, there's shape, like there's adjectives and adverbs like glistening, velvety, wooden, slimy, sluggish, chalky, obsidian, golden, raven black, cylindrical, faceted. And there's things like onomatopoeia, like thump, which that's a whole side quest too. But I realized, like talking to my kids, which I often try to use them and anyone who I can as like science, resources, experiments, and like to learn their mode of thought. He was watching Dragon Ball. I gave in and I was like, okay, I'll let you get a trial of Crunchyroll so you can watch some Dragon Ball, which is a popular Japanese anime for those who don't know. because he had been like reading the manga as we would go into like this bookshop, and he had been reading it, bought volume 1 of Dragon Ball, reading it, and like wanted to watch the show. Finally let him watch the show, and like he was so into it. But afterward, he described something that people have described, before, in that like they were disappointed with the movie or the show compared to the book. And I was surprised because like Dragon Ball is a manga, it's a graphic novel, and there's pictures there, so you'd be like, what they look like because it's there. There's not like any cognitive dissonance or dissonance of any sort in regards to what you were expecting, these two different things like being at odds with each other. But he described the sound effects in the show. Like the sound effects in the show were different than the sound effects in his mind when he was reading, and the voices. So like and I learned that for him, like he's hearing the sound effects, he's hearing the voices as he's reading them. He does not really have the ability to turn that off, whereas my daughter, apparently, according to him, has reported that she can like choose whether to hear these voices or these sound effects or not. But when describing something, people may use sound effects, especially like comedians or other storytellers, whether it's like the boom or the explosion, or they'll use a whistle, and it's verbal, right? It's language, it's sound, but it is tied into a sensory thought, like that gives you more of the experience. It involves a real world, like physical sensory experience. So that's the first part in like learning how to do image streaming, is like building your descriptive vocabulary. So I bought some books on poetry. I asked ChatGPT for like, what are some really good resources for descriptive poetry? And it knows I've been working on, like, it has in its memory bank that I've been working on aphantasia, mental imagery, and descriptive writing and things like that. So I ordered some poetry books because I want to slowly build these word associations with like words that are very descriptive. And now that I know sensory thought, I want to tie them to the sensory experience of what those words represent. So this is a lot of talking, and I feel like I still haven't actually gotten to the meat of how to do image streaming. Okay, so step 1, and there are some principles that I first, I'll say this. I advise you to actually get the book, either the audio version or the like physical copy of the book, because there's a lot in there that I think is helpful. But in lieu of this being the video about the book, at least the first part of it, for you, I'll say there's some important things to remember that Dr. Wenger says to do when image streaming. And number 1 is make sure you describe what you're seeing, or describe, like, if you're going to translate for the right mode, if you're going to translate some of these mental imageries, like images, say it out loud. You need to speak them. And I see that as you're using left mode and you're creating these associations. You're hearing yourself say it and you're verbalizing it, you're using your mouth. If you don't like say it out loud, there's, for some reason, I haven't gotten to like his explanation of it, but if you don't say it out loud, you're not likely to build the associations, these rich associations that we want between the verbal and the nonverbal. So number 1, when you do image streaming, don't just sit there and use sensory thought and not talk, that's what I'm learning. I think it's helpful to practice sensory thought, whether you're talking or not, but actual image streaming, make sure you get some time in to like actually speak what you're saying. Don't hesitate, just say everything that comes to mind. And also don't like worry about doing it perfectly. That's another point that he brings out. Like, don't hesitate. It's almost like stream of consciousness writing or drawing. Just do whatever wants to come out. Just put it all out there on the paper. That's how you want to talk. Record it. It's easy nowadays. You don't have to use a tape recorder. You don't have to buy additional cassettes. Some of you won't even know what those words mean. You use your digital device and have at it. Or better yet, if you have a friend or somebody you can do this with. I feel like there should be like some sort of, on the Aphantasia network, there should be like a thing where you can call up somebody and like spend 10 minutes and do this every day with. That'll probably be a thing at some point. So somebody take that idea, please, and run with it. So that's the first thing to remember, is there's some guidelines or like things that you must kind of do for this to be effective. And one is you gotta say this stuff out loud. The second part is be relaxed. There's a big part about relaxation, and that is also key to like what I've been learning in regards to brainwave patterns in different modes of the state of your mind and your brain. And essentially, when a lot of people with aphantasia have visual dreams, I was not one of them until like I started practicing sensory thought, or at least I didn't think, I wasn't able to perceive the images. And the book, The Einstein Factor, also talks about dreams and how to like remember your dreams more and things like that. But where was I going? Time is getting by and I'm losing train of thought. So let me just recap here because I'm losing my train of thought. So number one, say these things out loud. I'm tired. My brain has been running nonstop for like 60 minutes, but all right. So I'm losing my train of thought. So let's skip to something else here for a second. Oh yeah, sorry. Relax. Liminal states. I've had hypnagogic visions. And I think that's due to like the brain relaxing. And I think there's tied to things that I've heard as such as when you're relaxed, you're in a state in which the stay alive survival mind, logical, the frontal cortex is like, oh, I can chill out. And then like so student A is like, okay, I'm chilling now. I'm cool. I'm calm. I'm not yabbering. I'm not talking. And so now student B gets a chance to like, you can actually hear student B, which is the right mind, the creative side. We might even, use the masculine and the feminine to describe these two students. Like the masculine is the logical, like breaking things down, verbal side, and the feminine is like the more creative side. So getting a relaxed state is important. Little details like this, it doesn't seem important, but in regards to like the brain science behind it, like I think it's very important. In life, like if you're depressed or anxious, people with like vivid imagery have reported like it decreasing during periods of stress. So this is not just for people with aphantasia. You like want to get in a relaxed state no matter who you are. Try to align your life. And for me, it's like also a huge thing, like trying to find stability in life and trying to find people that encourage you, and so you're not stressed out. But in regards to imagery, maybe make it dark in the room. Breathe slowly. It talks about this silk breathing method. I've done some breath work, and breath work, you can get a lot of visual imagery just by breathing. I've experienced that, like where my imagination just turns on after like an hour of, it doesn't take a full hour, but like that's when it, for me, it can really start to kick in of like this specific breathing method. So you're closing your eyes and there is nothing. You're not seeing anything behind your eyes. You cannot image stream. That's the end of the video. or that would be the end of the video and the end of your journey, like it was for me in regards to image streaming a year ago, if that's all that you expect. And that's a point that was surprising to me in listening to the book. At some point, and I'm taking it out of context, and I wish I'd have to go back and re-listen, or if I had the physical book, which I don't yet. But at a certain point, he says, you're not supposed to see anything. At least for those of people who don't have mental imagery, or for a lot of us who have weak imagery, even when Wenger himself said that he was one of those people that didn't have any, couldn't visualize. But you're not supposed to see anything. And I think that's what trips a lot of people up, is that, and I probably should have started the video with this, is if you think you're supposed to see something, especially when you have aphantasia, you won't go any further and you'll just stop. But going back to something I mentioned in the first video, mental imagery is non-verbal thought, and that is more than just images. It's more than just colors. It is sound, it is touch, it is taste. It is anything that tells you that there is something there that you can sense and you're not using words to describe it. If you're remembering or thinking about something and without using words, that is mental imagery. So if you are closing your eyes and you're silent, and well, you're not going to stay silent because you want to say what you see or what you're sensing, and you start thinking about a song, that is mental imagery. Say what you would just say, oh, I'm hearing, present tense. That's another thing that the book talks about. Talk about things as if you're doing it presently. I am hearing the song. Even if you're not hearing it, say it as if you're hearing it. I'm hearing of, or I'm thinking of the song, and name the song there. Or you could say, I am seeing, or I'm thinking of a feather, and it's a white feather, it's light. Now, he does mention in the book that you can fudge, and I would say embellish. And this is where the dynamic of these two students, they're jazzing out, they're having a jam, they're working together and inspiring one another. You get a little twinge of, you're not thinking of the word feather, but you're thinking of a feather. You're not seeing an image of a feather, but you're thinking of a feather somehow. It's so weak, but you're thinking of a feather. Your quote unquote subconscious, according to the book, is wants to think about a feather. So you name the feather. You say, I'm thinking of a feather. And maybe you use this descriptive verbal mind to say, it's a white feather, because that's what I know. As you start naming things and using words, then that image becomes, the mental imagery and the sensory thought becomes stronger. As you start naming more of those more vivid details, it also this gets activated, the nonverbal senses. And this is what I've heard people describe when I've asked them about their mental imagery and they have strong visualization abilities, is oftentimes the image starts very weak and vague, but the more they focus on it, the clearer it gets until it gets to 4K. And so I've heard that from people who visualize, is that images aren't usually 4K right away. It's very vague, very blurry, very nondescriptive, but as they think more about it, then it gets clearer and clearer. And so that's the process of mental or image streaming. There's not going to be this flash of a big bright red apple. Shout out to my friend who loves to think about apples. There's not going to be this big bright red apple when you're image streaming if you have poor or weak mental imagery. You will just think of an apple without words. That's all it is. as you describe and start talking about the apple, think about, like, what does an apple sound like? What does it taste like? What do I want? And then you will find that your imagination will start to do things with that apple, and you're going to start out loud talking about it. So I'm thinking about an apple, I'm thinking about the color, and I'm thinking about slicing it. I'm thinking about the sound of the knife. I'm thinking about the knife dropping and the sound of the knife dropping. I'm thinking about that knife maybe slicing one of my toes off. And I'm thinking about, like, and so you see what I'm doing there is, like, as you start naming and thinking in non-verbal ways and sensory thought, it's like, it's all these other thoughts start coming out. Now, I just want to stop here and discuss something that the book, The Einstein Factor, this concept that it presents, and I'm not so sure about it, but I like where they go with it. But it's this idea that there is subconscious thought going on all the time, and dreams happening all the time. And it's about our ability to listen in and tune into that channel. I've heard people with what I would say hyperphantasia talk about having multiple channels that they can tune into and, like, watch and just listen to throughout the day. And so I think there is something to that. And whether we call it the subconscious or something else, that's, I guess it's true. It's like, I'm not, like, the left mind is not necessarily conscious of it. I'm not conscious of it, and especially in that I'm not paying attention to it. But in the context of this discussion about image streaming, what we are actually trying to do is pay attention to and hear the subconscious and draw it out and talk about it and make it conscious. We're creating a link between the conscious and the subconscious. I call it the link between these two different students that have two different languages. We said the one student A who's talking out loud all the time, it's like nonstop talking, you won't shut up. According to this theory or concept, the subconscious student B, the one who's drawing in their notebook, they are also talking nonstop. And not only are they talking nonstop, as I mentioned before, they are noticing everything. I feel like they are probably superior to the verbal mind alone. But there's this idea in the book that the subconscious is constantly running, and what we're doing is tapping into it and listening to it. So when we close our eyes in image streaming, there's this strategy that is described often in which you rub your eyes and you see the phosphanes, and you describe the phosphanes, like just the light itself. And you describe what you're seeing. Oh, I see a blob of green on the left side, or a blob of white, and there's tiny particles. And you just say it. And it's like, what is the point of it? That's what I did. I've experienced that. I'm like, this is useless. Now I understand, like, why you do that, or at least I think I understand. And the reason why you do that, there are, I think, two reasons. Number one is that by starting to use your verbal mind to describe things like yellow blob, you are in effect triggering and inspiring and giving a topic for discussion for the class of two. And the subconscious will tell you what it thinks about yellow blobs. It will tell you what it thinks about yellow blobs in the form of some monster from a show that you watched 30 years ago or something like that. And then once you got the conversation kick-started, then the subconscious mind will start providing more material. You will name that material, and it'll just be this dialogue. So rubbing your eyes and looking at the phosphanes and describing shapes is a way to get that kickstart. For people with visualization, normal visualization, closing their eyes, they will see more than, yellow blobs. They'll see maybe shapes and triangles and things. And that's where we lead into the second point, which is there's this thing I just recently learned about it. I've heard the term, but I just learned about it. It's called autogaugia. Autogaugia is not only the pareidolia effect, which is the effect of seeing like shapes in random patterns. Like if you look at the clouds and it's like, oh, I see a bunny in the cloud, or I see a face in the rock texture. That is pareidolia. You can make a random scribble and try to see like, okay, what that looks like a human face. So I'm going to draw a picture on top of that, which is a really cool art technique that Jay Myers taught me about. But in autogaugia, not only are you using pareidolia, is your brain like creating, like recognizing familiar images in random textures or shapes, but apparently when you close your eyes, and this is something that I've only developed within the last year, if you practice at it and if you quiet your mind and relax, your brain will start to see these patterns, these images, and it's actually kind of like your subconscious. You're actually creating something that isn't there. It's your imagination. It's like your visualization, but you're actually projecting it on like the back of your eyelids essentially, and in line with these, these phosphenes, these light traces or whatever. So with image streaming, what you can do is once you learn sensory thought and once you practice autogaugia, you can close your eyes, and for me, for whatever is in my subconscious, I will see two things easily, and it has this that has been expanding to other things as I've been like actually thinking about it and trying. But I'll see two things: I'll see lips, and I'll see the eyes and the nose cavities of a skull. Usually lips and teeth but usually these lips and like the ridges in the folds of the lips and like the shine of the lips when I close my eyes. It's not like full color. There's instances where it has become full color, but closing my eyes when I'm like, my brain is relaxed before like getting ready for bed, especially, it's a lot easier. There's reasons for that. Brainwave patterns, I believe, getting close to the theta, mostly theta or brainwave patterns, or alpha brainwave patterns, which relaxation and getting ready to your brain start powering down, if you will, for sleep. If you use that, becomes your conversation starter for image streaming. If I say, okay, I'm seeing a mouth, I'm seeing lips, I'm seeing the mouth is slightly open, the teeth, and let's say I have increased my descriptive vocabulary and I like embellish or fudge a little bit, and I'm like, oh, the teeth are a shiny porcelain, and the lips are voluminous and silky smooth. My subconscious, my right mode, if you will, I'm listening to it. It wants me to see lips for some reason. My left mode is like, okay, let's talk about it. I'm going to describe it. The right mode is like, okay, you just said porcelain, so now let's think about teacups. And I'm like, oh, I didn't say the word in my mind. I didn't think with the word teacup, but you want to talk. There's a sense of there being teacups. There's a sound of water being poured now. I'm not hearing it, but I'm thinking about the sound of water being poured in a cup now. And all these, like, if you're discouraged by this, I just want to say, like, all of these things that I'm describing now is like new. And like last night, it was crazy. Like how many memories and things that I was imagining and like getting into as I was like going into this. I'm like, holy crap. Now, as a warning, you're supposed to just, during image streaming, you're supposed to just say whatever comes to your mind. Do not hesitate. Just like whatever your subconscious wants to talk about, you name it. And holy moly, I don't want to curse here in case anyone has kids and they don't expose them to that. But holy moly, some of your thoughts can get pretty dark and brutal and scary, especially if you're in the dark at night and you're thinking about creepy things and you're thinking about family trauma and you're thinking about whatever, like, and you're not supposed to hesitate and you're supposed to bring that out. Like, this is some like deep stuff. And like at a certain point, I'm like, well, I'm going to talk about this thing, even though it's creepy and disturbing. And I'm going to talk about this thing, even though it's scary. And, you know, you just get into this mode where you're just uncovering a lot of, like, there were stories. I started telling myself stories of things happening that was coming to mind. And I'm like, they just want to come out. So I'm just going to verbalize these things. And it was like a dream. It was like a bad dream of like image streaming. But eventually I was able to like guide it and to say, okay, well, there was this, I'll just go into it a little bit. There was this like imposing, like dark, shadowy figure that was telling me that I'm in the room all by myself because I'm alone and because nobody wants me, because I'm worthless and all these other things. And I'm like verbalizing this thoughts, these nonverbal thoughts. I'm verbalizing this story that wants to come out. These feelings, right? They're feelings. That's part of image streaming. They're not visual. Sometimes they're just feelings, and the book brings that out. Image streaming, the visualizations can be emotions. It's not about seeing a red apple. It's about whatever emotions, whatever smells, whatever the sense or the memory of a smell that comes up, you talk about. So there's this dark, shadowy figure, and the story and the emotion that it wants me to know is that, like, that's why I'm in this room at night by myself, is because of this. And this is an ongoing theme that I've been dealing with and like processing and learning about. So of course it's going to come up. But then I'm like, and the other thing that came up is like, there was this thing in Stranger Things where 11 is like finally, like this is her final test. Like her papa, Dr. Martin, I think his last name is, he's trying to like gaslight her and tell her like, you're the monster, you did this, like this is your fault, you know. And she's like, no, Papa, like it's your fault, like you did these things. And like the power of no, which is something that I've been holding. And so in my mind, I'm remembering that image. I'm not seeing a visualization of it clearly, but it's enough. Like it's probably like a week. It is like a weak visualization. I'm remembering her face. I'm remembering that. And then I'm also turning it into like the last part of that season, which I think is season 2, where she's got her hair slicked back. And I'm describing this in words as I'm like remembering it. She's got the makeup and she's there with Hopper at the gate, and she's got like the 2 hands and she's like, you know, closing the gate. And so in my visualization, in my image streaming, I'm like imagining and thinking about what she's going to do next. It's just like she's like shattering and making this large shadowy figure that's trying to tell me I'm like alone and worthless. She's like obliterating it and like saying no, and then what replaces that is like all my friends and loved ones recently who've told me in different terms that like, oh, I matter and I belong. And then that's also been a practice. So that's coming up. It's like, okay, I need to be able to listen and hear and accept these demonstrations of love, and not just, and these messages of, oh, like, we like you, we want you, you belong, and not just like, let them slide off me, like let them penetrate. I'd rewrite my like subconscious beliefs about myself. So that's an example. It was like pretty dark. Like, you know, I had tears coming out at that point. There were other things that were scary and dark. But when you're doing image streaming, if you allow your subconscious to talk, it might tell you some disturbing stuff. it will take you to memories and open up memories that you did not realize you still had going on in your mind. And some of those memories are intense. So you might want to get a therapist or a friend that you can talk to and realize that it's a gift. But this is the reason why people with strong imagery, there's a correlation between really strong imagery and schizophrenia and other mental health issues. So if you want to learn visualization, and I'm just starting to, you have to, I think, take an approach which is necessary for approaching life in general, and that there are joys, there are beauties, there are miracles of life to be out there, but you have to be willing not only to accept those joys and the bliss and the pleasure in life, but you have to be willing to embrace the sorrow and the pain and the grief and make place for all of those parts. And that's what you're getting into when you're opening up visualization. You're opening up memories of the past. You're opening up terrifying ideas. And in the beginning of the book, the Einstein factor, he does talk about like, how do we keep these, the subconscious under control so that it doesn't inhibit our ability to do what we need to do to survive. Like, you got to go to work, you got to drive. You can't be letting your subconscious like take over. In that sense, there has to be balance, because whether you're thinking about verbal constructs and concepts while you're driving and need to be like using your sensory mind to take in like what you're actually seeing, like you'll get in an accident or you'll miss your exit or what have you. The same way, you can't be so into your sensory mind, letting like your subconscious talk, that you're not actually paying attention to what's in front of you as well. So I think that's pretty much it. There's so much in the book in regards to the squelcher, like the society and like the left mind, stopping our right mind and our mental imagery and our subconscious from talking, and like that's a thing. I mentioned breathing. I just want to give a shout out to ants, because ants keep showing up for me, and I have associated them now with neurons and this dispersed intelligence. So I don't know what's going on with that, but ants keep showing up and I'm paying attention to them. I feel like they have something to teach us in regards to cognition and this whole thing. In the book, he talks about like, if you're a writer or an artist, you'll never have artist block. And I see that now if you just like pay attention and do image streaming, like so many like crazy thoughts and combinations of thoughts were like coming up as I'm doing this. I'm like, oh, that would be an amazing thing to draw or to paint. So like for the creative, without aphantasia or with aphantasia, like it's such a rich storehouse of information. In the book, he talks about it being like, I guess the way that he got, motivated to pursue this was this idea of like, you have this inner oracle, which I'm reminded of the oracle from the Matrix now. It's like crazy how like just saying the word now triggers, like I'm listening to the other mode, which is like this scene in the Matrix. Didn't happen before. But the mind is like an oracle, and like it can, because the right brain is the right mode, the sensory mode is so observant, it is picking in, that was the other thing, it is taking in so much information, you don't even realize it. There was an example of this guy who was in one of the image streaming classes or practices or studies, and he kept thinking, like, he didn't want to say it at first, but he kept seeing this image of a tire on an old car. It turned out he recognized it and went and like called his wife, and like her dad looked at the rear tire on her car and it was like had been punctured or damaged, and like if they hadn't taken care of it, it could have easily like just blown out on the highway and could have gotten them in an accident. But somehow, I guess the explanation is that his subconscious, he perceived it and that was like the oracle saying, hey, this is important. You should probably pay attention to this. And how we can tune into our subconscious and like benefit ourselves in our lives by tuning into this other student that is like noticing things that we don't notice and has this intuition that we're not, like the verbal mind, the verbal conscious mind, the dominant mind, as it's called, is not aware of. So there's that concept in the book as well. Yeah, I saw on the back of the book or the description of the book that it was a way to build rich associations. And I'm like, that's exactly what we need to do. These two need to know each other well and be able to speak each other's language and inspire each other to have conversations. And like one will lead in the dance and they'll dance together, and the other, and then they'll switch, and then the other will lead the dance. I think that's where the power is. So there you have it. Image streaming, you don't expect to see images. All the senses need to be involved. If you can think of something without words, that is visualization. That is seeing an image. Describe it, talk about it. If that's what your subconscious mind, your right mind wants to talk about, fudge it. Embellish it. Use words to describe it. As you use words to describe it, it's going to evoke more nonverbal thoughts, either clarifying or intensifying that object itself, or switching you to something related but completely different at times. Start there, and apparently as you practice it more and more, not only will your descriptive vocabulary increase and improve, but the images themselves will keep taking on more weight and more vividness. So you'll have a practice of thinking about smells and sounds and tastes. Even if it's just, like I said, it's the knowing. I think we've heard of if you've been in like this, on this path and in this community, there's the knowing. How do you know about something without describing it in words and seeing an image of it? It's like it's underneath the surface of the water. You know what it is, you know it's there. You're not seeing it, you're not hearing it. Even that knowing, you need to verbally mention, there's a snake under the water. And I don't know how I know that, but there's a snake under the water. And as you say the word snake, try to think about, using sensory thought, think about the qualities of the snake. What kind of snake is it? Oh, it's a black snake, and its scales are glimmering, in the moonlight, and there's a big moon. And okay, now you have a choice. Do you start focusing on the moon, or do you focus on the snake now? That is image streaming. It's not clear visuals. It's not a clear color. Please don't. This is the message. I'm talking to you, but I'm talking to myself. Don't focus on the visual. Don't focus on seeing an image, at least at first. Just focus on that there is something there, and try to tease out all 5 senses that we are aware of. Try to tease out the smell, the taste, lick that snake on the head, rub it, feel the texture, the smoothness of it, experience that. Listen to the hiss, and as you listen to the hiss, maybe you're thinking of like how the forked tongue comes out briefly and like wiggles and senses or whatever it does. All right, I think I'm gonna stop there because it's getting bright outside, and I think if you stuck with me for this long, congratulations. Hopefully this is helpful to somebody out there. Image streaming, there you go. Practice it 10 minutes a day. Supposedly raises your IQ rapidly. I could understand why that could be, but it's not the point. For us, it's about unlocking this other world, unlocking memories, which unlock healing and new ways to process things, the subconscious, these beliefs about ourselves, like I was talking about myself. Having access to not feeling like a shell of oneself because you remember your past, you can think about your friends, you feel more tied to the present. Like life itself becomes a beautiful poem. And so that's what I'm going to plan on doing, this form of image streaming, 10 minutes a day, and see what happens.